welcome back to the Unpatched Gaming Podcast. Here we share video games.
Yes, we do.
I'm your host, Tyler.
And I'm Zach.
Zach, tell us about this beer. You brought one this week.
I did. You had asked, since we are kind of running low, your shipments are running a little behind.
Yes.
You asked me to just bring some stuff from my fridge. So my wife and I, just 2 weekends ago, I believe, maybe 3 now, went to go get Zilker's special release of their Houseplant Hazy IPA. It's really nice. It's a good, simple, clean IPA, very hop forward. You can get it right on the nose immediately.
Clean. It does look.
I just mean like in terms of the IPA style. Like there's not much going on in terms of, unique, crazy, this or that. It's just an IPA, and it's a damn good one.
It is pretty straightforward, and hop forward, definitely. I do get, interestingly, it's sort of seems the opposite of what I get from a lot of IPAs. I get the hop a lot in the back.
Oh yeah,
all the citrus is happening in the back for me.
Really, for me, what I get is that classic hop bitterness that most people who don't like IPAs say they dislike. I think a lot of IPAs are getting better at really expanding what an IPA can be and what that palate is. So I'd encourage people who don't like it to go and try IPAs with different hop variants and styles and combinations.
And there's so many.
Oh yeah, just countless. But this is one that if somebody tells me I don't like IPAs, then I'm not giving you this one, because it's a classic IPA style. So I like it. It's good stuff.
I do. I like it as well.
I also used that time to go get a refresh on their Icy Boys, which is just a rice ale that they have that is meant to be paired with the food truck named Spicy Boys that's right outside.
Okay.
And it's delightful. There's some downstairs in your fridge right now.
I'm excited. We will have that with the smoke.
Yes, indeed. Anyway, welcome back. We are talking about Breath of the Wild Lite.
We are, yes. Immortals Fenyx Rising, released, a couple of days ago now, on the 3rd, right? I think it came out on the 3rd, so...
Sounds right.
Just over a week ago. This is... you mentioned it just before the cast. This is what we were looking for from Tsushima. If you go back and watch that episode, I'm pretty sure we mentioned that, or I did specifically, why I was focusing on that game is because it was the first open world game that really had time to learn, shift development focus, if they chose to, and learn from Breath of the Wild. They didn't do that. It's a very traditional open world game, which is why it doesn't sit so high with you and I.
Sure, I can understand why people like it. I believe it did win the fan award, right?
It did, yeah.
Yeah, so I get it. I understand why people like it, and there's a lot in it that is fantastic.
Yeah.
But in terms of the design, you're right. It's very, par for the course. Probably definitely on the better half of that side of the course, I'd argue. But
I don't play many open world games, so I don't know. Like, I haven't played Assassin's Creed since 3. I haven't played Red Dead, The Witcher. I really don't like video games. And what was that open world game? The open world game that came out a while ago?
I almost just spat it out. Sorry for that weird that just happened.
Well, that happened the second time because you drew attention to it. Open world game, the open world game. What was that? With the cars, like the Mad Max. Jeez.
Oh, I love Mad Max.
Yeah, I didn't play Mad Max either. Or the Lord of the Rings games, Battle for Middle-earth and...
What?
Or not Battle for Middle-earth.
That's a great game, though.
We
should talk about that
Shadow
game.
of Mordor. Yeah, we should play that game.
Shadow of Mordor is very fun. I'd put Tsushima above those games, even as a stupid Lord of the Rings fan. Just massive Lord of the Rings fan. I'd still put Tsushima above those, but you're right. It didn't really grab me like it did for a lot of people. But that being said, this game, Immortals, is very much a... hey, let's do a Breath of the Wild style open world. Like, and maybe that's too big of a term to try to, or sorry, too big of a statement to try to make, but it does take a lot of the design ideas and concepts and use those as opposed to something more traditional. I don't think it is too big of a statement. It's very apparent what they're going for. They even make jokes. At least there's one that I really picked up on. There's some demigods you're fighting with, and after you clear out the encampment, they're just like hanging around talking,
and one of them says, "My weapon keeps breaking. What about yours? Am I doing this wrong?" And that's an obvious reference. I don't know if it's a jab.
It's a friendly jab, I'd say.
Sure.
I love the weapon breaking, and I know it in Breath of the Wild. I know that's an unpopular opinion probably, but I think it's used to great effect. That being said, this is not a Breath of the Wild video.
It's not.
/ podcast. This is definitely about Immortals, so I'd like to actually make sure that we start and just talk about the game, because we're not critics, we're not reviewers, but we do implement some of those philosophies into what we do here on the cast. So, and when you're doing that, you don't compare it. Maybe just for a helpful, kind of, hey, this illustrates why this is this way or something like that. But I'd like to start just by talking about the game for what it is, its merits, its faults, but then move into, okay, this is the first really obvious Breath of the Wild idea game to take those ideas and do something with them, either new or just using the same ones, and talk about how it worked, especially in contrast, what it took from Breath of the Wild, what it didn't, whether it worked or not, that kind of stuff. So... But yeah, I want to talk about the game on its own first. How was your time with it?
I enjoyed it much more than I anticipated.
I would say the same thing.
Well, no, that's not true. I was actually pretty hopeful because
I was the opposite. I was kind of like, oh, okay, Ubisoft open world game. Sure, I kind of know what I'm in for. And I was a little bit just kind of maybe not pessimistic about it, but just more apathetic, probably. Just like, yeah, sure, whatever.
I mean, my expectations weren't super high, but I would have liked to have been surprised. I wasn't. While I did enjoy it, and I'd like to go back and finish it, though there's no way.
Let's
do that right now. Let's say that.
I am the infamous game finisher among my friends and family.
He'll finish the entire Assassin's Creed series before we can even finish I don't know, Limbo.
Yeah,
which is a 3-hour game.
I'm able to get a lot of games completed. It's just what I do. I'm ashamed to say I did not. But it wasn't my fault. There's a bug. I finished one of the Aphrodite quests early, and when I went to go complete another quest, that quest activated. But then after, the cutscene for completing that quest started, cut off, and then it put the marker over on the quest I'd at that point already completed. The item to complete the quest is no longer in my inventory, nor was it back at that quest marker.
Yeah.
I submitted a bug report, never got anything back, so I was not able to finish the game, unfortunately.
Yeah. And for both of us, there were a lot of things that were happening this week. It was just a really crazy busy week, and I didn't finish it either. Even if you didn't have that bug, now that we know there's another portion of the game,
I don't know if I would have made it.
I don't think we.
It's a little bigger than anticipated, but partially our fault, I'd say, because we did spend a lot of time in the opening area.
Yeah, I did.
Just a lot of time.
And then because I knew you weren't going to finish it, and I really wanted to discover some of that side content. With my last session last night, I focused more on side content. But I'm right there at the end. If there weren't other games that I really wanted to finish, or my life wasn't going to be consumed by Cyberpunk, then I'd likely go back. I enjoyed what I played, and it doesn't take itself too seriously. It didn't give me the wonder that Breath of the Wild did, which is one of the biggest recommendations I'll make. If you're going to play this game and you have played and loved Breath of the Wild, you got to put that aside. If you want to enjoy this game,
remind you of Breath of the Wild a lot.
It will, and it's trying to do that. It's not even trying to hide it. It is trying to be Breath of the Wild. It's making some concessions there because it's a Ubisoft game. They're trying to make it a little more broadly appealing.
Yep.
But they saw Breath of the Wild and said, "Do that,"
which, in my opinion, is good game design. Just
sure.
That's a really good idea. Do that. William Faulkner, I think this is the second time we've quoted William Faulkner, second time in a row, but he just said the best ideas are always stolen, so never feel bad about it. He's just flat up open about that. But so I think that's not a bad
set your love
thing.
for this game aside if you want to enjoy this at its fullest. I had to do that after a little while.
Yeah.
And you won't you'll stop being let down.
Yeah, because it's definitely not, and it's not trying to live up to Breath of the Wild. It's just going, these are some good ideas, let's use them, and it does. So let's talk about one of the things that I think a lot of people bring up as a negative that should not be in a lot of reviews I've been seeing, and that's the tone. People don't really like the tone. They don't like the narrative. They don't like the characters so much. The whole game is narrated by Zeus and Prometheus having a discussion. Basically, Prometheus is telling this story, and Zeus is commenting, making quips, that kind of stuff. And basically, Prometheus is trying to show him, A, he's a bad dad, and B, mortals are okay. And it's good, though, and I think a lot of people, it is cheesy, and it's goofy, and
It's very tongue-in-cheek.
Oh, yeah, and there's a lot of, it'll be really childish humor, and then, a very explicit sex joke right afterwards, or a swear.
I think there's 2 times that I noticed, I still have that last area to go through, the King's Peak, but they call, or no, I guess 3. The term badass is used twice, and then Ares is called an asshole.
Yeah, so it's not this crazy awful,
No,
but...
and the explicit sex jokes, they're not even explicit in that, it's graphic. It's not graphic.
No,
but
it's just...
It's not like
a Toy Story sex
reference, where it's hidden
super...
there for the parents who have to watch it in the background.
Yeah.
It's a little more forward than that.
So it's a lot of people are saying that's an inconsistent tone, but the thing is that tone, whoever the audience is maintained the whole time.
The whole time,
and it's maintained well. Yeah, it's cheesy. Yeah, it's goofy. Yeah, it's a little bit crass, and it's great. That's one of the things that kept me playing. Is I'm let me just see what silly thing they're going to say next.
It's really silly. It had me laughing quite a bit.
Yeah, I laughed. It's a fun. I would say it's a game that even if it's not some masterpiece of writing, I applaud the writers for sticking with what they liked, and they had fun with it.
Now, I might want to revisit Conversation with My Aunt. I strongly recommended this for my little cousin before I finished the game. Well, I didn't finish the game, but I'm pretty sure she doesn't care, but maybe I should reference that language.
Yeah, maybe. And that's a good point. Who is this game for? I think that's a difficult question, to be honest.
I do think it's, at least given the tone, I still maintain that this is more for kids. And I thought about my cousin specifically.
The central theme is about family. It's really a family drama at the end of the day.
Which I thought was very well presented. Once I got to what I chose to be the second area, I was really taken aback by really how strong that narrative was.
It's smart. It delves into Hephaestus, one of the most interesting gods, I think, and his story of rejection and deformity and just difficulty growing up, and obviously exacerbated to the point of Greek myth, but they ground it in family disputes and bickering, and I never lived up to what Dad wanted for me. Things that people can relate to, and they do a good job, and I was engaged with it. And I honestly, there were a couple moments specifically with Athena's story and Hephaestus' story where I actually was taken aback and went, "Wow, that's an interesting take. I like that idea."
Yeah. I did. So Aphrodite is probably going to be everyone's first section of the game. They explicitly point you in that direction, but you can go anywhere. You can do just about anything. You can't go straight to Ganon in your underwear, but you can do basically anything else until you do finally finish those 4 gods and they point their lasers.
That's how I'm going to start referring to my morning routine. I just got up, went straight to Ganon in my underwear. You know what I'm saying?
I don't. What was I just saying? Oh yeah, I did Athena second, and yeah, I really liked the. Are we going to jump into narrative now?
Sure, whatever. We can bounce around, honestly.
Sure. Yeah, I won't give too many spoilers here because I think this is the closest to release that we've done a cast. So I won't give too many spoilers, but both her and Hephaestus are really emotional. And even though it's presented in such a humorous way, I was pretty affected by that. And not that I can, personally relate to Hephaestus, that was really good writing.
And it's because the whole point, right? You're trying to get the god's essence back. Some part of their essence has been taken away from them by the bad guy Typhon.
I suppose the broader strokes are important.
Yeah. And what you're trying to do is reunite the god with their essence so they can be themselves again. So, and Typhon is basically, his statement is that by taking away these parts of the gods, he has now made them perfect.
Who is the villain?
He's the bad guy. Yep. Typhon is the father of all monsters in Greek myth. He's a big baddie. But so that's his statement. So for Hephaestus, for example, he takes away, and this is where we're getting into some character spoilers. No endgame spoilers because we didn't make it there. But character spoilers. This is good stuff. So if you're interested at all in the kind of what we've laid the groundwork for, go play the game. But Hephaestus essentially has this all of his pain, sorrow, and hatred taken away. So all of the years of abuse, the memory of those things, has been taken away, and he's become one of his robots, just an automata. And it's super amazing to see, like right before he gets his essence back, Phoenix, the main character, says, do you really want this back? And he goes, oh, nothing bad has ever happened ever. Like, that's his response, because he doesn't, like, everything is just okay for him now.
But specifically, the reason he feels that way is because all of his memories are the pain of his life, which have been taken away and put in Pandora's box.
And he has just been endlessly crafting images of himself. I mean, it's scattered across his whole domain, just these statues and statues and statues.
Oh my God. I only use photo mode once, and I'll show you. They are so good. Honestly, they're probably my favorite photo mode images yet. On that island I was telling you about towards the edge of the map that you didn't go to, on the top of it, there's this overhang that just looks out in the ocean, and then on the skybox you see some like another continent on the horizon, just sitting on the very edge. There's a robot sitting on the very edge, looking.
That's amazing!
Out. It's so good.
And you can see, like, it's just him endlessly trying to create, to be able to communicate something, but he has nothing to communicate. So all these statues are like often in pain or deep thought or contemplation,
or like trying to help each other, but they're not able to.
Yeah, correct. And it's just this really, like, wow, that is really insightful. Like to be able to see that
really
like
good.
Real art, this raw art comes from that the difficulty of human life, and it's well done. I was really, and so by the time he gets that back, he's sad again, but he does thank you for it, and it's he's my favorite character, I think.
Yeah,
I really like him.
Athena's definitely my second favorite.
Oh, for sure.
Athena is this wise leader who has always had to live in her father's shadow, her father being Zeus, and she's way more qualified for just about everything than Zeus is, or probably more qualified than anybody else for anything.
Because the Greek gods suck.
She's the wisest and probably the most level-headed, certainly in the game. I don't know about every Greek god, but certainly those that are represented in the game.
Oh, for sure.
And I thought this was a really interesting way to portray her. So what she has turned into is just herself as a child. But this child has all the memories of being an adult, and the time that she invested to gain this knowledge and be this wise leader. But she remembers having the knowledge, but she no longer has the knowledge. Which it's a little difficult to explain. I feel like maybe I'm not doing it justice, but she knows she was wise, and she knows the things, like
that
the bullet points wisdom of why she was wise, but is no longer wise.
Yeah.
And so she's dealing with this complete shame of having worked so long to.
She already, even as a fully grown leader, felt inadequate because of Zeus, and now she just feels even more inadequate, and it's just it's just
really good.
Yeah.
And then also Prometheus and Zeus are narrating the whole thing. So as you as the main character are interacting with these gods, Prometheus is telling this to Zeus, and Zeus is reacting like, no, this is not what she thought. Because it sounds like maybe Athena was his favorite.
Athena's and this story and some others, he's extremely proud of Athena. Athena's his favorite child.
But obviously he didn't get that point across to her.
Correct.
And that's what he's like,
he kept
really
trying to make her better, and like, he's like, I just wanted to give her advice. I wanted to make sure she was making the right decision. And like Prometheus is like, well, why didn't you just let her make those decisions? Like, she's obviously qualified for it. He's like, I was just trying to help. And you just hear this like real sadness in the voice actor's
it's still a
voice.
little silly. It's still, and I'll say this because I had this thought way before I watched ACG's review. It's definitely like a Saturday morning cartoon sort of video game. He's totally right there. And it has that tone throughout, but you still get that emotion coming through, which I thought was great.
And so I am honestly, when you see reviewers talk about the story or the tone being a negative, I disagree. I think it is odd, and it's I rolled my eyes plenty of times,
sure.
And there's groan-worthy for sure, but it's consistent about that, and I like it, and it's very easy to forgive because of those moments that are more meaningful and touch on something a little bit more, honestly, complex and interesting. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'd say that's, in my opinion, the strongest part of the whole game.
I don't think I'd argue there. The open world, I think, gets in the way of itself. I think that's one of the weaker parts of the game, because
it looks pretty.
It does look pretty, definitely, especially when you can manage to bump up that graphics.
And not quite to the extent Breath of the Wild does, but definitely it's there. The ability to lead the player, you don't always have to have waymarkers. You can be led just by the visuals presented to you, mm-hmm. and the sounds presented to you in the world. Unfortunately, most of those things are going to end up getting a waypoint anyway.
Yeah, and you can turn it off. You can change pretty much any part of the HUD to your liking. And I turned most of the things off. I left like my health and my potions, and I think the enemy health. Maybe a few more nuanced things, but like the overlays on the screen, I turned most of them off.
It's a good HUD adjuster. I mean, you can really
not a good HUD, but definitely good customization there.
Yeah,
I think the HUD is super busy.
Yeah, but it lets you turn individual portions of it off.
Yeah,
which is awesome.
That's
fantastic.
Really nice. Even like really getting down to some granular stuff, I do like that a lot. So I'll give that a huge plus. But you can turn off the waymarker stuff, and you can be guided by the things you see in the world. But this is one of the points where I'm gonna go back to Breath of the Wild, because it's obvious what they were going for. Breath of the Wild has long stretches of absolutely nothing to its benefit, a huge benefit. Just riding your horse through these open fields, looking at this mountain with a little stream of smoke coming out on the top.
I'm gonna climb that.
Yeah, and to some people, might actually be a little boring.
And I know people like that. And I read a review from an escapist who said that Immortals is 10 times the game Breath of the Wild ever even wanted to be. And the primary argument at the heart of that piece was because there's more to do in it.
Yeah. So with that statement on the surface, I would probably agree, because it is actually more game. But Breath of the Wild is a very different sort of experience. Breath of the Wild is more experience.
I think that's very fair. It's building up your own dynamic adventure that you're setting for yourself. Your expectations are being set. The pacing is in those open stretches. That's why they're there, because otherwise it would just be, and then another shrine, another shrine, another shrine, another shrine, or another event, another boss, another this, another that. And it's not the case. It's, oh, well, that interests me now, and it gives you time to traverse the world and to get there. And there might be, a little thing here along the way, little thing there along the way, might get you distracted. But you're right, is that open stretch of just...
Yeah, and from players looking in, it's probably super boring. And there's always, it's a Ubisoft game for Immortals, that is, there's always something to do. But if someone were a backseat gamer just sitting on the couch watching you play Breath of the Wild versus Immortals as a passive viewer of the game, Immortals is probably more entertaining.
Yeah.
But this is where I really had to set my expectations for Breath of the Wild aside, because I think Ubisoft is doing something pretty interesting here, in that Breath of the Wild was not for everyone. Breath of the Wild was an incredibly successful game. Sure, it was a brand new Zelda game, a whole new concept for Nintendo as a launch title on a new system. Of course it was successful.
Yeah.
But
I
it's
know
not for everybody.
Who don't like it.
Definitely.
Like, genuinely dislike the game.
I think, especially with the HUD customization, that's a huge benefit to Immortals. With the HUD customization, I think Ubisoft is planting themselves very firmly right in the middle of someone who plays Assassin's Creed every year, or still playing a Rocksteady game every week. There's always something to do on those maps. So I think they're planting themselves very firmly right in the middle for something more like Breath of the Wild. And
I'd argue that they succeed in large part on it.
They do.
Like, this is something where there's a lot more to do. It's very easy to guide yourself to the next important thing to do. You can make your way through this world pretty easily, honestly. Mm-hmm. And those things that there are more to do of are very, generic open world tasks. Get the new gear, get the currency to be able to upgrade this or upgrade that. It's more streamlined. That's kind of the word that I've kind of been using. Is it's a streamlined Breath of the Wild style open world game. And right now, as far as I'm aware, it's the only other Breath of the Wild style open world game, at least to this extent. So.
And it's streamlined to the point where, like, Zelda, or Breath of the Wild specifically is what I mean. You might be able to say is like a really streamlined immersive sim. I would argue that
maybe
it's doing some of those things. When
it's definitely doing some of those things.
Yes. So I would say it's a more streamlined immersive sim. It's not strictly an immersive sim. I'm not saying that, but there's a lot of design philosophies. I think the only time that the game said no to me was trying to climb a wall in a shrine in Zelda. I don't remember another case of the game saying, you can't do that.
Yeah,
it's consistent all the way through.
Yeah,
except for climbing those slick walls.
Yeah,
but this game is not going to say yes to you. Immortals, that is not going to say yes to you all the time. But it's allowing you to experiment with some things that maybe other games don't let you.
And one thing it does even better than Breath of the Wild, I'd argue, is in Breath of the Wild, your tools, the fun little things that you have, like at your disposal, your bombs or your little magnet thing, very rarely do better damage than your weapons. Very rarely. Now, experimenting with choo-choo jellies and stuff, like, sure, that'll do more damage, but, if I'm going to hit a rock into someone with the stasis thing, it's not always going to do that much damage. Maybe if you get the right rock and the right enemy, but in Immortals, you throw a rock at someone, that's going to boost their stagger gauge up nice, like really high. And you can catch the rocks they throw at you and throw them right back, and it does big damage. Like, that's something I wish Breath of the Wild did more of, was let me be rewarded a little bit better for doing weird battle situations and scenarios.
Something that in Immortals that I was having a lot of fun with was sort of getting an enemy behind or in front of some rocks, and then when you activate your ability to pick things up, your kinesis ability, cool. They'll be flung towards you, but because the enemy is in front of you, they'll hit the enemy and do that damage. So you don't have to take the time to first pick it up and then throw it.
That's awesome.
It does seemingly the same amount of damage. But there's an ability you get later on where you can use the grab ability to pull yourself to the enemy, or if you upgrade that even further, pull the enemy towards you. The enemy now becomes a grabbable object, and you can't grab the rocks behind them anymore. Which is really unfortunate. Like, that ability or that play style was no longer valid, and you can't turn that ability off. So that was unfortunate. But this game is allowing you to play with some of those concepts, like putting a smaller metal block on a larger metal block getting on top of those two, and then using your kinesis ability to pick up the large metal block that's beneath
make you just fly.
Yeah, I did that just in my last playthrough.
Yeah.
And the game was like, oh, you're about to go out of bounds. And I was like, I'm going to let this happen. And, the world's just getting a little smaller beneath. That's great. And Breath of the Wild has so many moments like that. This doesn't have many, but it's allowing you to get some of that I don't think
other kind of
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I think it's a pretty successful middle ground that they've found for something like Breath of the Wild, which I hope we see more of, and something that I would say is a generic open world game at this point. Ubisoft has really made that their calling card, the Ubisoft open world, and it's doing all of that stuff. But it's doing some of this as well for people who maybe thought it was boring.
This game is successful, which is why I really hope Immortals is considered a success by Ubisoft, and that they kind of start pursuing those ideas. Like, sure, they can keep doing their Assassin's Creed stuff they always do, and that's fair. But to have this in the market and growing, and kind of carving out a space for itself, I'd like to see that.
I hope it's not. Yes, I agree with you. I really hope it's not like crazy successful to the point that Nintendo looks at it and was like, maybe we should do some of that.
Yeah.
No, please do what you were doing.
When has Nintendo done that?
I don't know. I actually don't know.
I think Nintendo just has these blinders on. Well, that's not true, because Breath of the Wild, like, the devs explicitly said, "Oh yeah, we played The Witcher 3, we played, these games, and that's what fed us." To make this game, but that's them stepping into a space that already existed, where usually they're just kind of making their own thing.
Sure.
I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that. But the gameplay is mostly exploration and combat. Like, that's it. You explore. You get exploration, combat, and puzzles. It has shrines, the Zelda equivalent, right, of shrines. They're there. You jump in, and it's a little puzzle room. Sometimes they're really short. Sometimes they're obscenely long.
Yeah, the ones you do at the end of every area, the big one you do for each of the gods.
It gets exhausting.
Actually, the only one I was really, really tired of was the first one with Aphrodite. All of the other ones I thought were fine.
Okay.
Especially the last one I did with Ares. That one was actually my favorite.
Oh, really?
Because
I liked Hephaestus.
There's let's see, Hephaestus had you
you have to get the fire. It's the ones with the fires.
Oh, yeah.
And the wind.
I did enjoy that, but I did Ares last, and I thought that was a bit of an evolution on that.
Oh, that's the one with those the blocks you hit and they lift up.
They levitate or they don't.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I thought that was
did
really
like that
cool.
a lot, actually. I forgot about that one. Honestly, I liked Athena's too, with the blocks tied together. It was a little... it was fun. I liked that one too.
Yeah. They're good, but specifically Aphrodite, that well overstays its welcome.
But you get into these little areas, and they reward you with something that can be used to upgrade your stamina, and then health upgrades are found just through exploring the world, typically, or exclusive. That's how they're found, by exploring the world, typically high up on something. And you go in these little shrine areas, you complete a puzzle, sometimes it's a combat challenge, and you get back out and you keep going, and you're just trying to complete the 4 areas. There are 4 gods, and you're trying to set them all free and get them their essences back. So, you explore, do some puzzles. Sometimes there's puzzles in the overworld that lead to some other kind of reward. Sometimes coins that let you upgrade an attack, get a new ability, that kind of stuff.
And I enjoy those most of the time.
Me too.
The what is it? Is it Hermes? The one where you have to run to
navigation
the spot,
challenges?
the navigation challenge. My favorite though was the bow challenge.
Really?
I really liked those. The bow, I don't know why. I'm really fascinated by the controls of the bow. I don't know where exactly the pivot point is on the arrow. So you have a magical bow and arrow, and you can just shoot it regularly, or you can consume your stamina to steer it, and time is going really slow during this time. Looks like my doorbell is ringing. But anyway,
you've got mail.
Probably so many games.
Yeah,
we've bought way too much.
Yeah.
Ugh, goodness gracious. Anyway, So you've got to steer the arrow really slowly, and the pivot point is like, it feels like it's somewhere towards the back, like rear of center of the arrow. So being able to steer it through these hoops,
Things Tyler thinks about.
yeah, okay. The point is the physics and the controls for the arrow are really interesting, and I had fun with pretty much all of
Yeah,
those.
and it felt good to control the arrow. It felt good to lift objects with your Hercules kind of grapple thing that we were talking about earlier. It feels nice. It's well designed. In that regard, I think Ubisoft typically gets those things pretty much nails those things in terms of the overall feel of using items, abilities, weapons. They do a good job. So, except for, I don't know why I don't like Assassin's Creed's weapon hit feedback. Like, I feel like nothing is happening.
Well, you haven't played the new Assassin's
Sure, I haven't
Creed,
played
right?
from Origins on, so I'll say that. But
I don't know either, but yeah, I'd agree with you.
Yeah, that's just. But typically, I do a good job. So the combat is basically smaller enemies can typically be taken out with your sword, swords, axes, and sword, axe, bow. Those are your three main weapons you have. Sword teams to do a little bit more damage, but then the axe boosts a stagger gauge, which is 100% necessary for fighting bosses. You need to get their stagger gauge up, and then they'll get stunned, and you can start just wailing on them for extra damage. And then you have godly abilities. You have an Ares ability that lets you shoot spears up from the ground, does big stagger damage. You have a little Phoenix with you that can shoot, that can make you invisible, make a clone of you, shoot a bunch of just fireballs at the enemy. These godly abilities cost stamina. Again, endgame, very necessary to use those things.
Definitely. And like Breath of the Wild, you can climb anything. Except for the walls in the shrine equivalents.
Yeah.
In the gates of
Vaults
Tartarus.
of Tartarus.
Vaults of Tartarus, that's right. So same thing there. And climbing, you got to use your stamina. So super important.
Yeah. And unfortunately, because it's just stagger gauge and health, for a game that relies a lot more on combat than something like Breath of the Wild, which really is not a very combat-heavy game, and without the experimentation allowed in Breath of the Wild from, different interesting strategies for trying to take out enemies, it does become repetitive, unfortunately. I pretty much would just charge up my Ares move, hit everybody, start wailing on them after they're stunned, wait, do it again. I had a sword that kept refilling my stamina gauge, so I didn't even have to use stamina potions, never used my axe after that point. You get into a flow, it works obscenely well, so you just don't do anything else. So I found combat a little bit lackluster, unfortunately. It has its place. I think if the combat wasn't as much of a focus, it would be perfectly serviceable, no worries, but lots of boss fights, lots of mini-boss fights, lots of enemies everywhere, all the time, and it's the same loop, so it's a little bit unfortunate.
Sure. I did enjoy the combat. I'm not very good at video games, it seems, compared to this guy. I have not finished Dark Souls, so I suck at video games.
That's a litmus test.
Yeah. This
So
combat,
most people suck at video games.
while it is, it's not particularly complex, makes me feel good.
Which is fine. And I'm glad you brought that up. That's in fact why I brought my side up, because I knew you were going to say that, because we had this conversation earlier, and I think that's totally valid. 100%. This combat definitely has a place. It's just not a place in my heart.
Sure. Let's see what we got here. This game needs some updates,
yes,
especially on PC. Let's go ahead and talk about those, because it is really near launch, and they've still got some stuff to work out.
And,
we're both playing it on PC, by the way.
Yep, and we both have decent PCs. I mean, mine definitely has an obvious bottleneck. I'm still using a hard disk drive because I refused to upgrade it until I have a new motherboard. But, I got an RTX 2060. I got 32 gigs of non-dedicated DDR5 video RAM, and then, of course, all the video RAM and the graphics card. I run most things at 2K really high, if not the highest graphics settings. It just works. And with this game, even when I bumped it down to 1080p, until I bumped it down to 1080p, it would crash. It had problems.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I turned the graphics all the way to low, it would still have problems on 2K. So there are some problems there, unfortunately.
I didn't have any crashes. I had a few bugs here and there that were pretty jarring. I had several audio bugs where just audio
would cut out. That
playing.
happened to me too.
Yeah. Or like an obvious cutscene would be happening, but like the somber overworld music would still be happening. But like
weird loading times, like things would just load in the middle of something sometimes. Yeah, it was, like the game would just stop and load and render everything out. That was when it was on very high 2K.
No, I didn't get that.
Yeah, it was.
But yeah, you've got the crashes, you've got the frame rate issues, really across any settings. I put it on 1080p low. That's not what I was playing it on, but I was trying to optimize some things, and finally I was like, okay, it can't be my computer at this point. So I just dropped it all the way down, and it was still doing that. So it's largely the game.
Yeah, I mean, definitely do graphics card updates.
And then you've got that, that progression bug where you couldn't finish the.
Yeah, and
that happened more than once, right?
Yeah, it happened on another quest as well. I forget which one.
But that was a side quest, though.
It was a side quest, thankfully. But yeah, there are some players reporting, another Aphrodite quest, a separate one where they acquire the item, but it doesn't go in their inventory, so they can't complete the quest. So, yes, unfortunately, there are a lot of issues with the current version of the game.
If you're going to pick it up, I would definitely recommend
console.
I think so, but also just see what the bugs are like on console, because while it's likely going to be at least a more consistent experience, you might still be getting some of those game-breaking bugs.
Yeah, unfortunately. Unfortunately. You want to talk about the elephant in the room?
Sure.
Let's just fully address the Breath of the Wild thing.
Okay.
So, I did a lot of thinking, because I played this game. Obviously, you see the stamina meter, how that limits your progression through the world.
Which is blue for some reason.
Yeah, it's blue. Very odd. You see your stamina meter. You see the shrines. You see a lot of these ideas that are just
being able to climb.
Anything.
And flying.
Yeah, you're
using your glider.
The way you glide across the map. Lots of Breath of the Wild in this game, so it's the first thing you think of. But obviously, when I was playing this game, there were things that were different. And what interested me most as a player is, what did this game take, and what did it leave behind? And I think, during this time, I went out with my wife to just have a coffee, and I pulled up my Switch, booted up Breath of the Wild. 10 minutes, I knew exactly what it was. I'm telling exactly 10 minutes, and I knew what it was. Openness. That's the word I'd say. So that's what was left behind when they took these other ideas. And what I mean by openness is there is a freedom present in Breath of the Wild that goes against, I think, that streamlined idea that we were pulling from Fenyx. It's counterproductive to that, because in Breath of the Wild, there's no limitation really to how you progress through the game. You could, like you said, walk up in your underpants straight to Ganon. You know what I mean? There's no, you said it earlier, it doesn't tell the player no almost ever. Everything is very, very put onto the player, for lack of a better way of saying it. And so you have, in the first 10 minutes, I was shield sliding, I was experimenting with the choo-choo jellies again, I was finding this little, for example, there's this little overhang right next to Zora's domain where the rain doesn't hit, and I started a little fire under there. That overhang does not exist to guard treasure. It does not exist to contain something for the player to do. That is just
It's not even there specifically so you have a place to make a fire.
No, it's just there, and it happens to be raining all the time. Well, all the time at this point, but all the time there, and you think, oh, because rain does this, and because I want to do this, I'm going to do that. It's something that's happening dynamically based on what you know about the world. It's not, and here's where you do this thing. Mm-hmm. There's that openness that's present in Breath of the Wild that, like you said, is not for everybody, but is what makes that game so incredibly engaging to me.
Yeah. I remember when I was like, probably not. But I picked up some apples before, and I saw myself holding them before I like put them in my inventory. And then when I finally came upon a stable, it's like, no way. So I just took out an apple, like I was going to cook with it, but instead of putting it into the pot, I just walked in front of a horse and fed the horse, and it was my friend.
It's just, and the game didn't tell you.
It always says yes.
Yeah.
Or like when you're sneaking by somewhere, again, usually in town or near a stable, if you're sneaking around, the dog is going to look at you and be like, "Oh, you want to play?" And then you can like spin around and befriend the dog, and then he'll maybe go find some treasure for you. Just really simple things, but also
Absolutely.
like higher concept things. Like, let's say you needed a fire and you see it's about to rain. So before your fire goes out, you quickly lift up a rock. You're just going to stand there. Just stand there with this giant boulder umbrella so your fire doesn't go out.
Yeah, or to keep yourself from getting hit by lightning.
Yeah.
You know, like
there's that as well.
Little things like that where, you know, the elements of the game exist outside of the other elements, but work consistently with those other elements. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And it's that immersive
like your wood shield. If you get struck by lightning, your wood shield is going to catch fire.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe you need to get away from this enemy while it's raining, after you've just been hit by lightning, but you're on a hill, so your flaming shield can be put out by sliding on the wet grass. It's great.
It's
really great,
man. And you know, a great example that I think sums this up really well is potions. In Fenyx, there are 4 ingredients. Each ingredient corresponds to a color, which dictates what kind of potion it makes. If you pick up the blue mushrooms, they make a stamina potion. When you pick up the red pomegranates, they make the red health potion. When you pick up the figs, the purple figs, they make the purple attack potion. So on. There are 4 potions, and it takes X number of ingredients to make this kind of a potion, and you're done. Breath of the Wild makes you keep a cookbook. Like,
there's literally a Breath of the Wild cookbook.
Yeah, like there's so many combinations and so many things that, again, the devs probably didn't even plan out what every single one did. It's when you combine, like, this ingredient facilitates this when combined with anything that has these characteristics. You know what I mean?
So, like, you might want to use, rice or meat as a base.
Yeah. Or a bokoblin horn with a bug to make yourself some sort of potion. And it's just so satisfying. It's and it's, there are still surprises in Fenyx. Like when I, made it to the King's Peak and just how pretty that was and how devoid of enemies it was compared to a lot of the other areas.
Really?
The base, there's still enemies, but it's more like there to just be huge, and you're climbing up these massive stone remains of these titans, and it's really cool. Or when I just went to investigate that giant whirlwind, and it was a super hard boss I should have waited to fight, but didn't because I'm stubborn and I play too much Dark Souls.
I tried doing that for I may have finished this game if I wasn't being stubborn. In the tutorial area, there's a way overpowered griffin very far away from me. So I use my bow to hit it and have it fly towards me. But it's so far away that I'm well outside of its arena. And huge complaint of mine. This is probably a complaint with any game that I experience this in, but it's happening here. When an enemy is outside of its intended area, it will just teleport back there. And if it's a boss, God forbid if it's a freaking boss, they start back with full health and 0 stagger. If it's a regular enemy, you can just go back and continue fighting it. It maintains all the damage. A boss does not, and that happened to me a few times. But anyway, I'm fighting this griffin, and so to prevent it from teleporting back, I have to keep hitting it. So just on the edge of wherever it's going to teleport back, I'll grab its attention again, and it's way overpowered. I spent way too long trying to do this, and I didn't even.
And why haven't you finished
it.
Dark Souls? That's the Dark Souls mentality you got right there.
Yeah, but I quit.
Oh, heard that. That makes 1,000 times more sense. But yeah, I think I agree with you that kind of stuff sucks. That happened to me in this game for sure. It doesn't let you leave a certain area. Again, streamlined, but in Breath of the Wild, there's this idea of putting things on the player, but then not telling them no when the player does something out of unexpected. When the player does something out of the ordinary, because you've put it on the player, you commit to that. And you're like, great, yep, no problem. For example, like I could not remember that I needed to strike flint next to the wood to get the fire to light. Like that piece of memory for some reason had gone from me when I first booted up Breath of the Wild again. And now, before even going through my inventory to go, what do I have to do? It's like some sort of rock. Like, I think I need flint or something. Like, it was like on the edge of my brain. But like, I have a fire sword. Whoosh, and I just, swung the fire sword and lit the fire. Like, the game didn't tell me no because I did it the wrong way. It's like, I mean, yeah, sure. Fire lights things, Yeah. Like
or you could probably, if you didn't have a fire sword or flint, I bet you could, well, if it's raining, you couldn't light the fire. I was gonna say have lightning strike the metal next to the.
But you could have yourself get struck by lightning with a wooden shield that run over and dump your shield on top of the fire and light the fire.
Sure, or hold a boulder or some other like wooden block only above the fire, but have the sword just next to it, so the lightning will strike the sword and light the fire.
You know what? Would not even be surprised if that worked. And that's
actually the box would probably light on fire as well and drop on you, so then you would die.
So this is what I'm talking about though. There's that openness here in Breath of the Wild that is missing in Fenyx. Fenyx didn't want to take that. It wanted to make it more streamlined, more general audience, put less on the player, take some of the burden on itself. Those games have their place, and a lot of people love those games. Obviously, there's that escapist reviewer who thought it was better to have a fuller world. I personally am a fan of boring games. I like saying that. I'm a fan of boring games. I think we should do a series eventually where we talk about what it's like to play a game that's not fun necessarily.
Yeah, like it's probably not going to make my top 3. We're going to do a little something for Game of the Year. But one of my favorite games this year was Gone Home. That, to anyone looking in, is a pretty boring game. But I loved every bit of it. And that's a different sort of boring than maybe something like Zelda.
Or Death Stranding. That's something that I think is accused of being boring all the time. Or Red Dead 2.
Sure. I was going to mention Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, all 3 I think are the best examples of that, and games that I still love because they're doing something different. But that's why maybe Breath of the Wild appeals more to someone like me. This game has its audience, and it has people who are going to like it, and honestly, it has people who will prefer it. I've already recommended it to someone who I think will prefer it.
Was it Josh?
Yes, it was Josh, who I think will prefer it. He already likes Greek mythology a lot, and it handles Greek mythology very well. It's not like a super unique spin or anything, but it contextualizes it in that family squabble.
Yeah, I really liked it. I don't know Greek mythology particularly well, but I knew.
But I played Hades.
Yeah. No, I knew all of the the higher concepts here.
Sure, of course.
But really seeing it in that family dynamic and in the other side of the family that you got to see with Hades, it was really nice.
I agree. So at the end, for me, this is a game that I enjoyed. It's not one that I think I'll ever go back to. It's not one that I think has a lot there for a player like me, but it's definitely one that I respect and love seeing Ubisoft put money behind. I love seeing that. Like, good job, Ubisoft. It's so easy, just especially, they're held up as this company a lot as this is just what we do. But, they to back something like this, sure, I don't think it's as safe a bet as people might have expected. You know what I mean?
No, it's got a lot of things that are, one, it's not the typical open world game they make. It is, I think, as I mentioned, it's that middle ground there.
Yeah.
But also, you've got that tone. I don't think they've done something that silly in a while. They used to do things that, in my opinion, were much more interesting than what they're doing now.
And silly. Rayman is
Rayman
very silly game.
I never finished it, but I did play about half of Beyond Good and Evil HD. That game is really silly.
Yeah.
So they have done this in the past. They don't very often. So I'm glad to see some of that. But there's one thing that I also think will hold this back from... that it held it back for me from even approaching Breath of the Wild levels. And that's the animation in this game. It's pretty rough.
That. Yeah.
And I think everything we've talked about in Breath of the Wild is incredible. I think one of Breath of the Wild's shining achievements is its animation. It is
how you can get
stunning.
I sent Tyler I thought it was hilarious, but just imagine Ubisoft, up on high with all their money and their, and this game's having a lot of performance issues, and they're trying to draw out this animation really far, and it's having some trouble. And you just get that Tony Stark managed to build this on the Switch with a box of scraps.
Yeah. I also stole that in my chats at work.
That's so funny.
It was a good joke. Yeah, it was pretty relevant.
Yeah, and it's a little bit unfair, I think, but it is impressive that you have the Switch running this absolutely gorgeous looking game with incredibly significant draw distances, and in Phoenix you definitely see that being tried in Phoenix, but I think you're right, the animation. It's just not quite there. There's something. It's not Uncanny Valley either. It's not Uncanny Valley.
No. I don't. I mean, like your attacks and climbing specifically. Climbing is really. I didn't enjoy it much at all in this game, and you're doing it a lot because the animation is just slow and bad.
Okay.
And,
yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's a totally fair criticism.
Everything. There's so many unique animations in Breath of the Wild. Just the way your horses move. It's realistic, but also has this sort of like painterly feel to it, like the whole game does. But that's one of the reasons. Like I really had to set aside my expectations, because from the very start, you see that this animation is not really on par, and the cutscenes are a good example of this. The way everyone walks, the animations are a little stiff. The animations there a little stiff. That was not the case with Breath of the Wild. It's incredibly fluid, and
dude, that weapon shatter animation, like whenever it finally breaks.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I always loved throwing weapons and watching them shatter, like when you throw a spear or something. Or, dude, how did I not mention it when I was talking about what I was messing around with? The boomerang. I messed around with the boomerangs so often. Yeah. They're so good. But yeah, anything else you want to say about this game?
I don't think so. Maybe just, wrapping up my thoughts on it. I did enjoy it.
Yep.
Once I put this up here as a joke, but really set your expectations for Breath of the Wild. Like, don't put Breath of the Wild on this game.
For podcast listeners, we have the Wii U copy of Breath of the Wild out with a posted note that has light at the bottom of it.
So Breath of the Wild Lite. Yeah, that's just a silly joke because we bought this on PC and we didn't have a physical copy to put up. But really, don't put Breath of the Wild on this game. Breath of the Wild is I would consider a milestone, like really an achievement. This game is trying to meet it in the middle, as I've said a few times. I enjoyed it for the most part. There were a couple things that I didn't like so much about it.
Sure.
But if I had time, I would go back and finish it. I'm almost there, but I didn't get the end game of Hades. I still have one more boss in Final Fantasy, and then we've got Cyberpunk next week. So the likelihood of me going back to finish it is pretty low, but I genuinely want to. The characters were all good. The writing was... I really thought the writing was a huge surprise.
Yeah, that was the most surprising part for me, for sure. I enjoyed it.
And I haven't played a Ubisoft open world game in a while, a very long while. I don't remember which came first, Assassin's Creed 3 or Far Cry 3. They both came out in the same year, but I played those. That was the last Ubisoft game I think I've played.
I played Far Cry 5.
I don't remember when Rayman Legends came out.
Oh, if we're counting that as well, then yeah, I played Rayman Legends.
Sure, then maybe let's not count it. Point is, I sort of not intentionally not played open world games very much. This was a nice surprise.
I'm glad.
I enjoyed it.
Very glad to hear that.
If you like Ubisoft games already and were maybe put off by some of the boring aspects of Breath of the Wild, definitely give this a shot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And maybe try. I had to leave it on about halfway through.
If you're someone who wanted to like Breath of the Wild, you should play this game.
Definitely. So for like the first half of the game, was not fast traveling and had the compass turned off, and the quest. So there's. I mentioned every aspect of the UI can be altered here. There's even like a quest objective, not just a quest marker on your compass, but an objective that says go do this thing. You can turn just that off if you want. Point is, turn some of that UI off so it's just you in the world. That's going to give you a lot of what Breath of the Wild. If you are not used to that sort of game, and just play typical Ubisoft open world games, turn some of that off. Let it just be you in the world. You're still going to have things to do all the time. But really, look at the world and set your own personal markers. You're going to get that enjoyment. Because I was on a time crunch, I had to start fast traveling. I had to turn on the compass again. But yeah, also maybe refrain from fast traveling. Climb up to a peak and fly off of it. Oh, that's something this game does a little better, I think. The flying in this is
it feels really nice.
So
yeah, it feels really nice for sure.
So with Breath of the Wild, you've got just a
paraglider.
The paraglider, which just allows you to glide down from a peak to wherever you want. You can't control the speed at all. So the paraglider's base speed, I think, is faster than your base flying speed in Immortals, but you can upgrade that to have not a dash, but basically just like a speed
is something
button
that you should have had from the beginning. It bothers me when games lock convenience things behind an upgrade tree. Like there's one in Immortals where you can pick up, all the items in an area by only picking up one, and it's like, well, just let me have that. Like, don't lock that behind an upgrade.
They probably wanted an excuse to pad out that tree.
Sure.
That's
won't, not super present,
I won't argue
though.
against
it's not
that.
super present. That's just a little nitpick for me for any game that does that kind of stuff.
But it's like the cheapest upgrade. Let it be the first thing you get. That and jumping while climbing. So really just get all three of those. Get all three of the traversal upgrades first. They're the cheapest ones. Just get them before you get an attack. Because you didn't get I went fast flying for a while,
because
right?
I broke the game because I just immediately got Ares fully upgraded.
Oh, it is
special.
Broken.
And I was like, well, the game is now broken. Like, yep. I did it, which is fine because that's the kind of game it is. It doesn't really, doesn't mind.
Yeah, but really, the flying, even though I didn't like climbing that much, when I got to the top, it was a huge reward for me.
Just to
I
jump
loved
off and
flying everywhere in this game.
That's amazing. Well, man, glad you enjoyed it. Glad we got to share it together.
Yeah.
If you guys are playing it or want to play it or are thinking about playing it, let us know. Follow us on Twitter. We're very active on there. We'd like to see you there. We're also on Instagram. But where you can get us the best is on our Discord. $2 a month tier on Patreon. You get to join our Discord. Right now, we just started a monthly playthrough. I'm playing through Sly 3.
And I will not be joining him on this one.
No. This is just, and this is one that's not going to be, for the cast explicitly. This is just our monthly playthroughs. One of us on the team is going to be playing a game and discussing it. Just kind of an open discussion there. So just little extras. We'll also be doing, when we get enough listeners, FAQs, fun stuff like that you'll be able to find on Patreon, so definitely go check us out there. We would love your support.
Yeah, and next year we're starting a year-long series, what will likely be almost the whole year.
So ready.
We'll announce it, but that would be great for people to join us on.
Yes.
And it can be played at anybody's pace.
Yeah,
so
please.
we're really excited to start that. But if you're, in addition to that, if you're watching us on YouTube, consider a like and a subscribe. And if you're listening to us, please give us a rating on
your preferred
platform. That's correct.
Yeah, it would help us a lot. We're just getting started, Yeah, we just we need that support from you guys. But we love having you here. We love sharing games with you. Definitely let us know what you want to be sharing with us, and we will get right on that.
Thanks, guys.
Take it easy.